What's up? This is Fathery of Tex-Trek coming at you live with our reactions to tonight's new episode of Star Trek Short Treks. And I am joined tonight by the one and only Starfleet boy.
Whoa, the one and only.
The only one I know of.
In my mythology, there's lots of Starfleet boys and girls and Starfleet men and women in the universe. I'm just one. One of many.
The only one I know existing in the real world in 2018. But
Yeah.
what year are you at the academy? Like Tilly was a third year cadet. So what are you?
I think Starfleet boy is perpetually like a freshman, kind of like a
just the
he's
Van
just always...
Wilder, the Van Wilder of Starfleet Academy.
Oh my. Yes, actually, that is exactly what I'm aiming for.
Like just always doing like crazy parties and stuff, and like Boothby is like walking around trying to clean up after you, and he's just like Starfleet boy.
I love it. Yes, that's, oh my gosh, thank you for adding to my fictitious universe here.
To the Starfleet boy
or my
lore.
Psychosis.
the ever expanding saga of Starfleet boy. And we also might have PJ on board here in a moment. But yeah, we are talking about Saru's backstory, the episode "The Brightest Star," written by Yeon Kim and Erika. I'm going to butcher this last name, Lippoldt, and directed by Douglas Aarniokoski.
It was. Do we just go ahead and say how we felt about it?
Yeah,
or should we wait for
reactions. I'll let you go first. As the guest.
I loved it. I found no problems with it whatsoever. I have nothing to nitpick about. Maybe one or two things. I don't know. We could talk about that. But I really loved it. I thought it was actually a great origin story for the character of Saru in a sense. Like the explanation by Lieutenant Georgiou about why no one's helping, even though it's kind of like it's so like kind of, it pisses me off that like, you know, they're not going to help his people, but at the same time she's following the prime directive to the T. And there's precedents for this kind of thing happening before where you know, the Federation has kind of like gone back and you know, selected individuals from a pre-warp type situation, and that was the case in First Contact, the episode of TNG. So there's a lot of cool. It's just really a great episode. I loved it. I thought it was the best short trek by far. It beat all the other ones.
Yeah, this is probably my favorite now. Even though like I haven't loved any of them. I kind of liked Calypso, but again, just like having a story about a character that I already have some attachment to, you know, it kind of already has a lot going for it to win me over just going into the episode. But yeah, one of my beefs with season 1 of Discovery is that I really wanted to get to know more about Saru's background. I was thinking before the show ever premiered, okay, eventually they're going to do an episode set on his planet. You know, they keep talking about his people, and they're this unique race of a prey species, essentially, that is harvested, and that sounds like something that we haven't really seen before in Star Trek. And I was like, oh yeah, that'd be a cool setup for a future story that we never got in the first season. So I was kind of anticipating this episode. But with all of these, even with this one that I like, it just, I'm not super in love with the format of the short stories like I thought I would be with like the short film format, because there's so little you can do in 15 minutes. And so I would have liked to have seen like just this. I think this could have been expanded into a full 40-50 minute episode pretty easily.
That's definitely something I would 100% agree with you on, is that, yeah, but like I think that's like in the other two short treks I felt that way because I felt like the story deserved more clarity, or like that the story, you know, maybe wasn't clear enough and deserved like to be expanded so that there could be more clarity. In this one, I want it to be expanded just because it was cool. Like I thought that the idea was actually so great that like it, you know, and like I think just before we went live I was kind of mentioning Stargate, like it had that kind of vibe that like it's interesting to think about Star Trek as like from the perspective of the Federation. It's always so easy because in the original series that's pretty much your only perspective, and then the
Right.
same thing is true you know, in the Next Generation, then and then even DS9, even though you get a few strays from this. But here in this short treks and with Saru's kind of story, the whole perspective shifts to like Saru's. And I always wondered, that was like one of the actual interesting things about Star Trek Discovery season 1 was like Saru's people. Like how are they, like what's their deal, right? Like why is he the only one of his people who's joined the Federation, all these things. So there's like little tiny clues that are sprinkled in throughout that. And I think this little short treks, why it works so well as a short, is that like um we get just enough to explain the whole entire situation of Saru in just 15 minutes. And yeah, it could have been a great episode in season 2. I think it would have been neat if we did have more. And I think there isn't there supposed to be a Saru story in I mean, one would imagine, right? Like he is, you know, he's going to be a central figure. So who knows how this will play into like our understanding of this character.
Yeah, this could totally be a setup for a season 2 episode. There was some mention months ago, if I recall correctly, of people saying like we'll be seeing Saru's planet in season 2. But I don't know if they were just saying that because it was before they had announced short treks, and if they were just teasing it that way and they were only talking about the Brightest Star, or
Right.
if there's going to be a follow-up episode to this. But you know, the not to get too off topic, but the format they're going with in season 2 is really intriguing, where they're going to have the ongoing arc of investigating the 7 red burst phenomena that show up. And so each one of those has potential for a very different story. So it'll kind of have a little bit of that classic episodic Star Trek nature to it. At least that's how some of the actors and writers are describing it now. So there could be like a red burst at Kaminar, at Saru's planet, and we come back here to investigate it, and he might have to come face to face with his father and sister again, and they'd probably be like, "Hey, bro, where were you? You just like disappeared one night."
If they're still alive, I mean, it seems like this harvest occurs like every few years or something like that. So who knows? I imagine it's interesting. The father's obviously old, so he's survived quite a few of these things. Maybe because he's the high priest or whatever, he's exempt from being slaughtered, and then or whatever happens to them, and then by that time, like the meat doesn't taste good anymore, so it doesn't sustain the.
That's what I was thinking. You want to get them young, like
that's totally. I think we can't. I don't know when PJ's gonna come on, but I think we can't not talk about like the parallels between this episode and like the meat industry, like our own civilization and what we do with cattle and things like that. Because I do think that there's like a really strong kind of message being sent in this episode about that kind of thing. Because like, one can imagine from the perspective of a cow, it's kind of like that. If you're a Kobe beef cow, you're being massaged every day, given beer, so that you're like, as tender and juicy as possible when we slaughter you and cook you, right? So from the cow's perspective, they're like having this wonderful, like peaceful life of like leisure, and then all of a sudden this like one day this guy comes along, slits your throat, and then you're gone. You're like, your life ends like right there. That's kind of the vibe I got from Saru's people. They're cattle. They're being treated as like they don't have any choice, basically, is the way that it seems. Is that even the father's like super upset about it. So I don't know if you want to talk about that.
Saru even mentioned in I believe it was the first episode in the Vulcan Hello. He tells Burnham that we are your livestock of old, and when he's describing his species to her. So yeah, that connection was kind of always built into his character. He's basically like a space cow. Although I think it's a lot different to slaughter a sentient, self-aware creature like Saru than a cow. But I know some people are gonna fight me on that. But it's,
Well, I agree with you. And so this is the one critique that I do have for this episode is that like, okay, so yes, the Kelpiens are, possibly, unaware of warp technology, but the Baul are certainly like they're certainly warp capable. They have technology that like floats, like a thing that floats off the ground and beams people basically to their ship. And heck, their technology is falling off their ships, and Saru's able to like manipulate or whatever. But the Federation can't interfere because of the Kelpiens not being a warp civilization. So like I feel like this is a situation where like Picard or Kirk would have been like, what the fuck? Like we need to find the Baul leaders and tell them that like you can grow Kelpian meat without having to like slaughter the, like if that's what indeed is occurring, which is what the morbid thing my mind goes to. But I guess that's the one major critique I had is that like I do think that like as a advanced conglomerate that they wouldn't allow the Baul to like do this to the Kelpians.
yeah, it's kind of iffy how the prime directive would apply in this situation, because the Lieutenant Georgiou establishes, yeah, you Kelpians, you're a pre-warp civilization, but
And
she
also
was,
that he's the first ever to manipulate technology in this way, and they're pretty primitive. Like they don't have wait, Saru, it looks like they have like pens and like knives, but no technology, right?
yeah, although that might not have been the first part of one of those ships that have fallen off that he
Right,
tampered
that's
with,
true.
but even though he was seemed kind of confused about it, was asking his dad, explain this to me, but in the original series, though, we did see Starfleet interact with pre-warp civilizations sometimes, like in was it Friday's Child with the Klingons on that planet trying to get like the loyalty of the tribe of people who live there.
Oh,
In Mirror Mirror, in the opening of the episode, we see them trying to negotiate for dilithium mining rights with people who seem to
that's
be
right.
pre-warp. So I in my head canon, I don't know if anyone else has ever had the same take on it, but I think that if the civilization has already like interacted with pre or with people who do have warp technology and like they're already aware of other people on other worlds and stuff, I think you're allowed to like communicate with them, but you're probably not allowed to like go down and completely like change the order of society on the planet.
Yeah, I think that this like portrayal of Starfleet and the Federation is a little colder than maybe what we're expecting it to be. With these like kind of hardened, like Georgiou with her hardened, rules. Well, she's only a lieutenant here, so whoever her captain is also like, oh yeah, we know what's going on down there. Like they're all getting slaughtered, or maybe they don't know, But he does say, "Can I return and help my people?" And it reminds me of like I guess Saru could kind of be like the Anakin Skywalker of his people. It's
Oh,
like the
don't make
Jedi.
him the Anakin Skywalker. He didn't kill any children. He didn't murder children
Not
in
yet.
this.
Not yet.
Oh, that's terrible.
He's about to be trained by Starfleet. Maybe he'll
Yeah, especially Discovery Starfleet. So they can get a little violent sometimes. But
But maybe to your earlier point, maybe in season 2, the thing is that he will be able to, like, maybe he's able to convince the Federation that uh his people are being wrongfully subjugated or something, and then they'll finally interfere, and maybe that'll be a cool reason for him to go back to his home planet. It might not be as eventful as like a rebellion or like a space battle, although that would be awesome, but it might be as simple as like we've reached a treaty with the what was it again, the
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 Baul.
Baul the Baul. We've reached a treaty with them, and we've given them the resources to replicate Kelpian meat so that they can eat that. If that's the case, we really don't know if they're really, eating kelpians, but that's just like where my mind goes to.
Well, do we know that Starfleet has replicators at this point? Because I mean,
Well,
technically, they have synthesizers, which
right, sorry. So
seem to
they'll give
be
them
seem to be the
synthesizer
exact same thing as a
technology.
replicator.
It's exactly the same thing on Discovery. In fact, it's cooler. It's the effects that they use to generate like that like one, like it seems to like weave it into form. Like it kind of like looks like 3D printing and fast forward. It's kind of a cool effect, and I like it. I kind of like it better than the transporter effect of the replicator.
But the other thing that this episode reminded me of is the Next Generation episode, Pen Pals, where Data receives communication from a pre-warp person with the little girl that sent out that message. Is anyone out there? And Data
Yeah.
responded.
Yeah, that's true. And isn't she on like a planet that's like, being threatened by like seismic activity or something like that, and it's like, yeah, and Picard's really pissed off at Data in that episode, if I recall. So I wonder if there was like some kind of similar argument or discussion going on with Georgiou's pen pal Saru, like on her ship.
Yeah, there's like a whole episode of Star Trek that we didn't see between like Lieutenant Georgiou and her superior officers, debating like, can I go like rescue this guy? He's aware of warp technology. He's aware of advanced aliens, and he seems to be pretty clever. And he wants to get off this planet. Is there any way I can go get him? There's a whole like moral quandary there that happened behind the scenes that we didn't get to see. I was pleasantly surprised to see Lieutenant Georgiou show up there at the end because I really like her as a captain, and it seems like the only stuff we see with Michelle Yeoh going forward is going to be where she's an evil Terran Empire, becomes Section 31 operative.
I think Georgiou might change given that she's now in, a different universe. Like everything for her, I think that like it's kind of like how Lorca was able to kind of fit in, even though he definitely did some off-color things. Like I think he kind of adapted, and I don't know if he really ever thought he would really get home. I mean, he pulled it off, but I don't know. Georgiou seems to be pretty in that deleted scene or extended scene or whatever, where she seems to be gung ho about becoming part of our universe and like actually like ruling in a sense, not necessarily becoming the Empress, but she's definitely ambitious enough to become like a captain. It might be a weird twist that we're that occurs with her character, but I get that vibe more than anything.
We have a comment from It's a Small World. Hello. It's a Small World is like our number one live streaming fan. She's always popping up in the chat every time we get on.
There's a couple other comments. I don't know if we're allowed to read them, but I guess I like the first one where Carpet.
You still there?
Everyone's kind of darker, and Saru's like scared all the time, and he's like,
you were cutting out there. I didn't hear what you said. What was the comment?
I agree. I agreed with Carpet Dog. He says Saru is the only character on Star Trek who isn't an asshole. I think that's really.
I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, and he was an asshole. He was willing to sacrifice Ripper the tardigrade to save Lorca. So, oh snap, we got a PJ up in here. So
we're about to discuss whether or not Saru's the only character on Star Trek who's not an asshole.
Saru is the best character on that show. The show should be just about Saru.
Is it true that he's not an asshole though?
Yeah,
because he was kind of a dick in the early.
Everybody in Discovery is kind of a prick. Yeah,
is Tilly?
Especially Stamets.
It's true. Wait, Tilly might not be an asshole, actually.
Actually, no. Tilly is great. I love Tilly. Everybody loves Tilly.
Yeah, everyone is hashtag silly for Tilly.
That's true. I think I rescind I disagree with my previous agreement, and I say now that Tilly is actually the only character who's not an asshole.
But I actually really like Michael Burnham, but a lot of people seem to have big problems with her.
You know what? Michael Burnham, everybody, like the haters say she's a Mary Sue. Like she's actually far from that. She makes a lot of stupid mistakes for as smart as a person that she is. Like the whole thing about her is that she's a human trying to be Vulcan, and that's not a good idea.
Yeah, and
According to like her character development, because when she kills Takuvma, everybody's like, that's such a stupid thing to do. But she suppresses her emotions so much that she does make stupid decisions, and her entire journey is about learning to embrace her human side. And I think that's what they're going to eventually go with. That's the direction that I think that they'll go with her. So
yeah, and see the character they've created, she is very capable. You know, like she's super intelligent. She's got martial arts skills, but she also has all this emotional vulnerability. And even though
she has emotional baggage, like up the yin yang,
she's compromised.
Yes.
So to me, that's a compelling character.
It is. Yeah.
I think there's a lot of potential there that I look forward to seeing them explore. Mickey B in future. I call her Mickey B. So I'm looking forward to seeing more Mickey B in future episodes.
So I just think that like, and you know, I guess it's fitting that she's his adopted sister, but I think that we already went through that whole journey with Spock, you know, struggling with his half human side, and so it's like I like Michael Burnham because I like Sonequa Martin Green. I think she's a fabulous actress, so I think she brings something really cool to the role and interesting to watch. But I do agree that like I think the character is not original. I think that there should be something like I think she could have had the character Michael Burnham could have stood on her own without being related to Spock at all. I think that was just like, kind of like a choice that they made to like connect Discovery instantly with fans to some sentiment from the original series.
Right.
That's my opinion.
That is true, but it does allow them to bring Spock into the show in an interesting way, and they have some type of story there, or so they claim. They said, like, we'll explain why Spock never mentioned his human foster sister. So I'm gonna.
She probably goes crazy and tries to kill him at one point, and then he's like, "I disavow you." No, just kidding.
I mean, this is the same guy who also never told anyone about his brother, who also never told anyone.
I agree.
The Vulcan ambassador is his dad.
I agree completely that there could have been a sister. I'm not like I don't like argue with that point at all. I just think that like the character could have stood on her own. I do think you're right. Like it is going to be interesting to see how they do tie it in, but I kind of wish that we had something totally new, like a whole new. Again, you know me. My platform's always been like, why are we setting it in the past? Why are we even doing any of this? Like it's such a good show and a premise that could have taken place like post Voyager.
Because they set it in the past because Brian Fuller was a big original series fan, and he had this crazy idea of about a Klingon war before the original series, and then he quit the show, and then other people were like, okay, well, we have to do this weird Brian Fuller idea now. And that's why.
Damn you, Brian Fuller, you screwed it all up.
Did you guys like this short trek? Or?
Yeah, so PJ, I did want to ask you what you thought about it. We both seem to like it. I know you were the most nervous of all of us going in. So with your low expectations, did it live up to your low expectations?
No, I had high expectations for the Saru.
Low expectations.
The previous two short treks didn't do anything for me really, although they weren't like terrible. I did kind of like the Tilly one because it's about Tilly. It's about a character on Discovery. The second one was just whatever. It didn't interest me at all, and it's something I don't even want to ever rewatch. But this Saru one is like, I'm going to watch this like 10 times. It
was really good, yeah.
It is really good. And there are some plot holes, like just out of the blue, like Saru calls her Captain Georgiou, but she doesn't
Lieutenant Georgiou.
Lieutenant Georgiou, but she doesn't actually introduce herself. So I'm thinking somewhere in that short, there was a little bit more like communication between him and her
Mm-hmm.
via that like weird vertical text pad
Yeah,
thing.
he was like texting on an iPad.
Yeah. Uh, but I think maybe they took that out so that we would be surprised when we saw Michelle Yeoh at the end. And man, I love that. Like that short was probably better than some of the episodes of season one.
It was so good. I agree. We're in concordance.
And I just want to note, there's the novel Desperate Hours I have in my hand right now because when she showed up, I wanted to know what ship she was on. And according to this book, which I'm assuming takes place around the same time, and Alex Kurtzman said that extended canon is not necessarily going to be adhered to 100%.
Right.
But apparently her captain is Captain Kurapati of the Narbonne. Narbonne. So, and she's a lieutenant at that point. So,
is her captain a human with that name, or is he like a Federation alien?
This book here is the only one I haven't read yet. I've read the other two Discovery novels, and I'm reading the third book of Star Trek Destiny, which is fucking fantastic.
Yeah, I need to read those. I bought them all because they were like $1 on the ebooks.
Well,
so
the
I bought
ebooks,
all of them.
the first one is $1, and then the second one is more, and then the other one is like same price. But when I bought the first one, I thought they were all going to be $1, and I was reading them on my phone, and I was like, they're a bit more. It was like 5 something. So, man, it's one of these things that it's like the first two novels are a build up to the third, but it's all like a very interesting build up. There's some action here and there. But when it gets to the third book, it's just like boom, boom, boom. Everything just so well written. David Mack is a great writer. I look forward to reading more of his books anyway. So yeah.
According to Memory Beta, the USS Narbonne or Narbonne was a Federation colony support vessel operated by Starfleet in the 2240s. As of the year 2246, the ship was under the command of Captain, as you said, Aurobindo Kurapati, and I can click on that link to look up that captain. Anyways, it was the first Federation vessel dispatched to assist the people of Tarsus 4 in the wake of the crisis until other vessels led by the USS Enterprise could be diverted to the colony.
That's
in the immediate... What's that?
That's from the Conscience of the King.
That's right.
Where there was like a fungus
Garth
took over all the... No, it's not Garth Izar.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah, the fungus just wiped out all the food supply, and then
that's about Governor Kodos, right?
Yeah.
That's what the book is about. It's about Lorca and Georgiou teaming up to fight that guy.
Prime Universe Lorca. So it's our only look at him in any of the expanded universe content.
I can't get into this book. I don't know why. I just keep putting it down and reading other books. But anyway,
the captain is the captain. Oh, sorry. One more thing. The captain is a male human serving as the captain, and he's a Martian of Indian descent. So he was, So that's the origin of that captain.
Cool.
Well, that answers the question I had,
which was.
No, I was asking PJ, like, was that a human with a name like that, or was he?
Oh, right on, yeah. There you go. It's an Indian human.
Okay.
I'm of Indian descent, and that name was alien to me as well. So I would have not known as either.
Well, India's a big country, so I'm sure there's a bunch of variety of surnames to come from that land.
Did you guys expect to see the Baul in that episode?
I was hoping we would, but I was kind of thinking they weren't gonna blow their load on that with one of these short treks, because I've already gotten the impression that these are cheap, short, little, very small things. They're not going to spend like a lot of money. They're not going to spend like a lot of time like bringing in the makeup people to design the Baul and all of that stuff. They're going to save that until they're doing an episode where they have a lot more money and time to put into it.
Well, this episode, this short trek seems to be the one that they actually put a lot of effort into.
You're right. Yeah, because they were on location. They were like shooting
a little bit
on
more
location.
money, and there's multiple people in like this head to toe makeup, pretty much, and costuming. The cinematography is great, like just the look of Kaminar or that area that they're in, and learning about the Baul and the fact that they're this superior warp capable species. They're much more advanced, and it seems like certain Kelpiens, like Saru's father, know about things like the world beyond, like when you reach a certain age. And apparently Kelpiens live really long, so maybe his father's like 200 years old. When you get to a certain age and you haven't been taken by the Baul, which is fucked up. Like,
yeah.
We were talking earlier about how maybe the meat isn't any good. Like, one thing I've learned being a meat eater here on Earth is that babies taste better than adult animals. So,
yeah, that's true.
Yes, vice versa is so delicious. It's true.
Well, when you look at human beings and how we consume meat and kill things, and like how so-called advanced we are, but it wouldn't be beyond belief. I mean, Klingons, like in the far future, in the 24th century, hunt and kill things still, and they eat real meat. So it's not beyond belief to think that.
And they would eat other sentient things too, because they eat Captain Georgiou. So it's like, so you're right.
Well,
it's not unheard of.
In Deep Space Nine, in the episode Blood Oath, when they're going on their quest to kill the albino, the Klingons
right.
are.
They talk about eating his heart.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I didn't know that was literal, like eating someone's heart, until after I watched Discovery season 1. I'm like, oh yeah, they probably were talking about like cutting his heart out and taking a bite of it
and feasting upon it. Yeah, it's true.
But what PJ, what you were just talking about with the Kelpiens, they reach a certain age and then they're expected to sacrifice themselves in order to maintain the balance of their society.
No, they when they're absorbed by the Baul or transported or taken away for like to be eaten, I guess, it's not dependent on age. I don't think. I'm talking about like an elder, like Saru's father. At some point, they would kind of catch on about, like other civilizations, something like Starfleet, and I mean, the question is: are the Baul with Starfleet? Are they an enemy of Starfleet, or does Starfleet not interfere with them because the Kelpiens are ignorant to other worlds?
So one of the things we were discussing before you joined was what exactly the prime directive, how it is applied in this specific scenario, and if they can't, if it's kind of weird that they can communicate with Saru after he contacts them, but they're not allowed to like stop the Baul from eating these people.
See, that's one of the things
we're assuming they're eating them. It's likely that. Oh yeah, you said they're. Well, he did say we're like the cattle of old, but I don't know. Like, what if they're being something even worse is happening? What if the Baul is how the Kelpiens call the Borg, for example? What if they're all just being assimilated into Borg drones in the Delta Quadrant? No, I don't know.
I'm not sure if that's worse than someone actually eating you, but
that's true. You're right.
Like, at least then you're assimilated and all your thoughts can live in the Borg hive mind.
That's actually true. No, but it's true. They are probably being eaten. I thought that it would be more like, kind of like I thought the Baul would be more like hunters, like actually like that. I like in my imagination, before I knew about this episode, even though I do think it's interesting and cool, it would be more like Saru's people were just very sparse on this planet, and then these like advanced hunters came to the planet or lived on the planet, as a matter of fact, and there was like a symbiotic relationship where like, you know, the hunters would hunt down Saru's people, and maybe that's why the Federation wouldn't have interfered before, because they're all pre-warp, the Baul and the Kelpiens. But
yeah, I was kind of
that's
wondering
definitely not
about
the case.
that. And you know what we knew going into this was Saru had also mentioned, yeah, we are your cattle of old, and he also said that his food chain on his planet, it's not really like a food chain, it's just binary. You're either a predator or you're prey. And so that definitely like implies to me that yeah, they just evolved to be the prey, and the other species evolved to be a predator, and that's how their ecosystem was balanced. And you know, like you can't have too many Kelpiens because maybe like they'd eat all their food supply, so you had to have like some predators keep their population in check. We ought to have Kelpiens to like feed the Baul, and so it is some type of like very twisted symbiotic relationship like that. But I was definitely thinking, because we see Saru is so you know, like his senses are so keen, and he has the threat gangula, and so you'd think that he would be, you know, from what I took from some of the things they mentioned, was that he would always be like under constant fear of like a predator is about to like jump out and kill him and try to eat him like at any possible moment of his life. So I guess that's how the species evolved, and they eventually developed the system where like, okay, we'll just come and like abduct some of you sometimes, but we won't wipe you all out.
Exactly.
Again, just like the format of the short story is kind of frustrating because I want them to expand on stuff like that.
They will expand on it.
There is something that I caught, though, that kind of supports what you're saying in the episode. In the beginning, Saru is describing the experience of being taken, and he's talking about how like some of his people even are like elated about it. They're like super excited about it. And he goes, and it is said that the vava, whatever it was some kind of new word, stops at that point.
The vihari.
The vihari. So that throbbing obelisk thing might be creating like a threatening sound that constantly is in their like consciousness. And so maybe that's why he's the way he is. And so when they get beamed up or whatever out of their existence, the vihari or whatever stops.
Okay. PJ, you look like you got something to say.
I think that means their general fear that they live every day because of their evolutionary instinct to be always afraid of a predator. And I think the promise is to be relieved of that, like death is a relief. So I think like basically what they do on Kaminar is pretty much scout for people who are suicidal and just gather them up and say, here, there you go. And I think at this point in the evolution of the Baul and the relationship with the Kelpiens is that back in the day, like they hunted them down, they ripped them apart, like that was the thing. But now it's like completely humane. Like when they get absorbed, like they're instantly painlessly killed type of thing. And that even though the Baul aren't probably at this point in their technology, they could maybe they're like so dependent on Kelpien meat, like it's essential to their growth and it's a I don't know like how that works, but
well,
apparently
it's safe
apparently in season 2 they're going to expand on that. They're going back to that planet. We're going to Saru's going to reunite apparently with his sister and his father. They're going to they're going to think he's dead, obviously, and we're going to meet the Baul. If we don't meet that species in that episode about Saru, I'm going to be so fucking pissed. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, what you're saying makes so much sense, though, because we were wondering if we were going to see a follow-up to this in season 2. Because I know they had mentioned before that we would be seeing their planet in season 2, but I didn't know if maybe they were just talking about this short Trek episode.
Doug Jones specifically talked about an episode where they go back and how this short Trek is like a prelude to that episode.
That explains so much, because that now we know why they had like all these nice sets and everything already built for like their little village and everything. It's because like they were shooting an actual episode there. So just bringing some real world production knowledge into that. That actually explains a lot. So what I was telling Starfleet Boy was that I think with the format for season 2 where they're investigating the 7 different red bursts and they have to each one's going to be like its own story. That's probably what will draw them back to this planet.
I agree with you. Like, it's going to be about the Red Burst. I think they're only going to be going after one. I think their journey to the one, because they're all over the galaxy, right? So, but I think their journey to one will lead them to Kaminar, or Saru's going to get sick, and then they're going to be like kind of close. So, like this second season will be so good because it will be episodic more than the last season.
Yeah,
it's still serialized in the fact that they're eventually reaching the goal that they set in the first episode.
Yeah, and that's the exact format I want. I want to have like good, strong, self-contained, standalone stories that you can do in one episode or maybe in 2 or 3 episodes. Yeah. But I also want to have like that big arc that builds up, week to week. So I'm excited about the format for season 2, and I'm definitely excited to see more of what's the planet again? Kaminar.
Kaminar.
Yeah, I want to see more of Kaminar, and I do want to see the Bible too.
Yes. Yeah. Definitely.
But yeah, the thing with what we were talking about with the vihari, like what you were saying about like that's when like your I guess like that's when your threat gangula develop and you start getting the fear instinct that Saru has.
Yeah, Saru, like even on the Shenzhou in that book, Fear Itself, even when he's like in his quarters, even when like he's just completely alone, completely safe, there is always this like throbbing fear that I can't imagine ever living with. But that's their species.
And he has a cool line in the book, Desperate Hours, where he's being transported, and he says he actually loves being beamed because in the like those few seconds where he's between 2 places, he feels so safe because nothing can grab him.
And there's a containment field that keeps you frozen, and like that's something that would be very constrictive and like kind of claustrophobic for a regular person.
Yeah, it's funny because it's
about that.
It's very freeing for him, so that was cool.
It was the opposite for poor Barkley. who like saw those weird creatures.
Yeah, he turned into a scared Kelpien when he got beamed. But yeah, one issue I did have with this was that some things felt a little inconsistent with how we see Saru behave on the show. But now that we're talking about like, this might be like before he goes through the vihari and gets like the fear instinct. I need them to elaborate and expand this, and when we come back here maybe, because my frustration again with like the short film format is that they can't take the time to explain everything.
The vihari is what stays with a Kelpien until he's dead. Like it's when he reaches, like when he's born, I suppose when they're babies they're not exactly so fearful, but when they reach maturity and they start understanding that like things can kill you. In the novel Fear Itself, he actually has a hologram scare the shit out of him basically every time he enters his quarters, just to keep him like on his toes. And like Burnham enters his quarters, doesn't know what the fuck's going on. She's like, "What's this thing attacking me?" Yeah, it was pretty cool.
I can relate to that. I have this little sound effect thing on my front door that when you come in, it sounds like the door whoosh from the original series.
Oh, cool.
And so like whenever people come over to my place and they haven't been here before and they come in the front door, they're like, "What the hell is that noise?"
You're creating a fear factor for your guests so that later when you eat them, no, I'm just kidding.
Keep them on their toes.
It's funny because it's the opposite with like, the last thing you want as a meat connoisseur myself, the last thing you want is an animal that was killed in fear because the meat's tough. You want that super tender, relaxed meat. such as a Kobe beef steak.
Scared all the time.
Yeah, they'd probably take like. Can you imagine all the chemicals, the adrenaline that's pumping through their body all the time? It's like it's got to be bad for the meat.
So PJ, the vihari, because you seem to have picked up on something on this that I might have missed, but is it like my impression is that it's like something that, like when you come of age, it like starts happening to you. So is it kind of like you know, like the Vulcans have Kaminar when like they're done with like their emotion suppression training. Is it like it's kind of like a coming to age thing? Like something triggers it in your brain, and you're just.
I think it would be if it were like a natural thing. I think it'd be more like Ponfar than Kolinar because
Or like
it
in
like
X-Men when like a mutant kid is like a teenager and they get their powers for the first time.
Well, I think like when the Kelpien reaches puberty,
Yeah, it's like a
they
puberty
start
thing.
being like that's the point when they're the scaredest little bitch they've ever been in their life, and they continue that way until they're an old man. And I guess when you're like an elder Kelpien, you can kind of like learn to control your fear more and just accept things and like accept ritual. Like his father's just like just accept the way society is. Don't question anything. This is the best way. Like, but Saru is a different kind of Kelpien. He's very fearful, but he's got balls. Like
Yeah,
he's the
he's not
ballsiest
fearful
Kelpien
here,
there is.
but he's fearful on the
He's smart.
show.
Yeah.
So is it like your impression that like this Saru, he's like pre Vihari Saru?
No, I'm trying to explain that I don't know, but my interpretation of that is that it's just this nagging fear that every Kelpien lives with. For example, that episode 8 of season 1, when he's relieved of that fear and he turns into a complete psycho. That's like your hormone, like with a human being, your hormones when you reach puberty are essential to your development as an adult, just like their nagging sense of fear is essential to their development as a Kelpien adult. And the whole thing about you being relieved of this through the Baul absorbing you or transporting you or whatever they do is literally killing you and taking away your fear, taking away that part of you. No Kelpien who does that believes that they're going to, like, they're not going to die. They know they're going to die. So I think certain Kelpiens more so volunteer, and this is just like pure pulling out of my ass speculation, but some Kelpiens who just can't take that shit are just like, okay, I volunteer to be. I don't know that the Baul will pick them or they volunteer, so I'm not sure how that works.
So I have a question about the Star Trek, and again, it's another like conundrum of having a show set in the past. So they've introduced us to a really cool kind of concept, like the Baul and the Kelpiens, right? So like, where are they later on? Like what happens to them by the TNG era? Like, how come they're not important enough to ever come up again in in Star Trek?
It's a vast. There's thousands of humanoid species we haven't even seen.
Yeah,
like,
there's a lot of
keep
species
going
that
with this
show
shit
up one
forever.
time. Like,
yeah, but one would think that like, well, we'll see what happens, right? But like, that's a question that needs to be answered because like, why would Saru, the only one of his species to ever go through Starfleet, like blah 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 blah, why would
the Andorians in TNG? You don't see one. I don't believe you see any Andorian.
You only see one when Lal is trying to pick her.
You see two in TNG. You see one in that episode Offspring of Lal,
okay.
and then you see one in Captain's Holiday on Ryza. But they're both like background characters.
Right.
Okay, yeah.
Right, it's true.
But there's so many species. I mean, they can.
Dr. Phlox, the Nobulan. Why do we never see the Nobulan in anything? I mean, I know it's because like they didn't get invented until Enterprise, but that doesn't bother me.
The fact is, if they create character as new species in prequel shows, and then you have the Picard show coming up, you could feature a Denobulan.
It's true.
A Kelpien.
They should have a Denobulan and a Kelpien.
That show could be the one show to rule them all. Like it could totally be the one show that like brings it all together and kind of like ties it all in.
Yep.
The Picard show, make it so.
They should, like Picard should say something like, "If only I could be as great a leader as Admiral Michael Burnham was." And just
and that's it. Immediately, totally no, but it would immediately legitimize Star Trek Discovery. He could also say like, that Kelpien rebellion of 2472 or 2274, whatever the date. I can't think right now, but he could mention something about the Kelpien whatever, and it would also
Yeah,
legitimize
or he could
Saru.
be like,
And
remember that time that Jim Kirk fucked a Kelpien? Saru's sister.
Oh,
Oh,
good grief. Wow. Is this drunk Tex-Trek? No, I'm just kidding.
No, I have not been drinking. This is where my mind wanders.
I like
But
it.
PJ, there's something else I was going to ask you about. Oh, the thing, the Vihari. I'm sorry I keep bringing this up. I don't know why I'm so like hooked
You
on
really
this.
love the
But like, was that something that like they mentioned in Fear itself, or is that just only heard in this short trek?
no, I can't remember if they mentioned that specifically, but Saru just talks about like the way he feels, and throughout the novel, and every decision he made, like I don't want to spoil anything, but he gets in like this really precarious situation where he makes a mistake, everything goes to shit, and it's his pretty much sole responsibility to like save everybody, and like the fear he describes while doing this, and like the bravery he has to muster. Uh, it's like that episode where he asks the computer, like, "What the fuck do I do?" Compare what did the best captain do? He's always like doubting himself, but he at the same time he's always trying to like push himself to be as brave as like pretty much every other species he encounters.
Yeah,
So
and he does have a cool arc in season 1 of Discovery where
yes,
there's a shot in the Vulcan Hello where he's shitting. He's not shitting. He's sitting in the captain's chair on the bridge of the Shenzhou. Again, I haven't been drinking, sorry. But yeah, he's sitting on the bridge and he looks like really nervous. And there's like the ensign Connor is like, "Oh, what should we do?" And he's nervous and he's hesitant. And then when Burnham and Georgiou walk onto the bridge, you can tell like he's kind of like relieved that he doesn't have to be the boss anymore, that someone else is in charge. And then yeah, we see that episode where he has to take command of the Discovery, and he's again like doubting himself. And then later in the show, when you see him command the Discovery, when they're in the mirror universe, you see like at that point he's finally developed and become like the leader and the commander that the crew needs him to be. So he has kind of a cool arc that's showcased in season 1.
he'll end up being the captain if there's a fourth season.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. And then
The way they're doing the show is like kind of like an anthology where the
new captain
is
every year.
interchangeable every season. You have Lorca, now you have Pike, and Pike's going to be there the whole season. Pike's going to leave and become fleet captain or go back to the Enterprise, whatever. And then next season, they're actually going to, at the end of second season, that's where they're going to actually pick up the captain from Vulcan that they said they were going to pick up at the end of the first season. And then that's going to be a whole thing in the third season. And then Saru finally, I think at the crescendo of the show, if it lasts, hopefully it does, is Saru being the captain. And that there isn't necessarily a main character. It's pure ensemble, but I mean, come on. I love Saru. Everybody loves Saru. To me, I kind of like do these mental gymnastics where I'm like, no, he's the main character of Discovery. Because Doug Jones is not only one of the best actors, creature actors ever to exist, and a nice guy and all this, but he plays the role of Saru better than, quite frankly, anybody else plays any of their roles in that show. And that's not a discredit to them. That's just saying that he is seasoned. He knows exactly what he's doing. He can work under that fucking heavy makeup so well because he's like been through it before. And that I think that's why I love this short so much, is because it gives me information about him, his home planet, the Bowl, which I was curious about, and I'm very optimistic about the second season because they're going to expand on that.
Yeah, so. Doug Jones is great as Saru. I don't know if I'd go as far to say he's the main character, but
no. I don't. I know he's not the main character, but like I said, I like to think that at some point they'll focus more on him or like do more with him. I mean, I don't mind Michael Burnham being the main character. That's fine and good, but
you know, the two of them are the only
two
characters.
Best supporting character.
Yeah, well, The two of them, I'm pretty sure they're the only two characters that have been in every episode of Discovery
I
so
love their
far.
relationship, even in the books, like going back in the books. Two of them together are wonderful. Their relationship has been like tumultuous, and is that a word? And
Yeah.
but it's one of the best aspects of that show, and that's why when people like really dump on Michael Burnham as a character, I'm like, no, she's a great counterpart to him, in a sense. And I know I'm stretching here, but they have like a Bones and Spock relationship,
Yes, but
kind of.
it's a unique enough in the way that
Yeah,
they were kind of like competitive. Like they both want to be like Georgiou's favorite. And
yeah,
the book helps
Right.
expand that they were kind of competing for the first officer's job,
yeah.
and yeah, they you see in those first two episodes of Discovery, which have really grown on me. I like going back and watching those, and I wish I could see like a Shinjo show about that crew. But yeah, you see like Saru is trying to do like some scientific scans, and they discover the Klingon object. And then Burnham is like kind of like pushing him away from the console, and she's like, "Yeah, you don't know what you're doing here." And if you know, pay attention, they do have like this real dislike of each other and this competition with each other.
But
And
love,
then
there's a secret love underneath all that.
yeah, it's like a brother sister sibling rivalry
Yeah,
type thing.
yeah.
Yeah, and you see them come closer together over the course of season one, and then season two in the trailers. We see them have an emotional beat when it looks like Saru might be hurt or sick or something, and you see like Burnham being concerned, and she tells him, "I think the line is, you're the only family I have."
My favorite moment between two of them in season one is when he goes into the engineering or the spore room and he confronts Burnham about using the tardigrade. And she's like, "We can't use it anymore. It's like gonna die and all this." And Saru's like, "You got to." And she's like defying his orders, but Saru is so set in his ways, and he's like physically sweating. Like they do the makeup where like he's all like glistening and shit, and like he's really tense, and he's like, "Do what I say," and he's like really. And Michael Burnham's just like, "We're gonna kill the tardigrade." That was my favorite moment. And there's also another part where he gives like that speech about like Captain Lorca ain't the fucking man now. I is. Like, you know what I mean? Like that was awesome.
Yeah, when he gives that speech about like like this is our ship, and we're gonna we're gonna go and put a stop to Lorca and these Terran Empire shenanigans. Yeah, that was when like the show really started to feel like a Star Trek show.
Yes. Yeah.
It was like a long build up to it. But yeah, another thing about like Doug Jones, like just his physicality. I always talk about how I kind of get frustrated with the Discovery makeup. I think it's a little too complicated. They go a little overboard, and it kind of limits the actors' abilities to emote. And you see that a lot with the Klingon actors.
Oh yeah.
With Doug Jones, he's such a good physical actor. He's trained as a mime that just like his body language can communicate so much that even though he can't really use his face, it's just doing everything with his eyes and his body movement. But he'll just do like a subtle little movement of his head or something that can you don't really notice it unless you're looking for it, but it is conveying so much to you, and it is a spectacular performance to watch, and one of the strengths of the show. Doug
Indeed.
Jones has also mentioned in like interviews and stuff how a lot of viewers of Discovery have come up to him and said that they really relate to Saru because they suffer from anxiety and they get like that being scared and stressed, just
That's every
all
human
day.
being now. Everybody is like that now. Stress filled and anxiety filled. Like this is you see that latest episode of South Park? I mean the second last one where it's all about like Cartman has been diagnosed with anxiety
No, I haven't
and
haven't gotten that
he
far, but
uses that to his full advantage. But like somebody tells him, I think Kyle or Stan tells him at the end, like, Cartman, everybody fucking has anxiety in his world. Like, you can't avoid it nowadays. Like everybody, but that's what makes Saru so relatable now because Saru was kind of the everyman, like the everyman character. He kind of represents that now for like modern people and today. We're so like obsessed with our phones and social media and if you have a kid, like back in the day when I used to get bullied, used to go home and like forget about it. Now it like follows you, and you leave a comment somewhere, and like somebody can just like totally like destroy you. And I'm not an American, and I don't wish to ever live in your country, Steve.
Yeah, you don't have
But
to
it's
rub it
scary as
in our
fuck.
faces.
Like I can't imagine going some places in America and like just the fucked up fucking shit that goes on down there. And I'm not saying Canada's perfect, but like you can walk the streets and not have to worry. You can be black or Chinese or whatever and not have to worry about somebody like, or like Jewish. Jewish people are getting fucking like attacked in the streets and shit. Like Hasidic Jews and stuff. Like I'm seeing all this stuff in the media. I don't know if it's true. Steve, when you walk out your door, like people just like going crazy.
I don't think it's as bad as a lot of people outside of the country seem to think it is, but um, like I
But
live in.
Fucked up, man. You like your president is so fucked up. It's unreal. Oh my god.
I think
our
people have less
president,
anxiety in Canada
our
than that.
president is a baul, perhaps.
Oh
No.
my
He's
god,
a,
that's
he's
what
a
he is.
predator.
That's exactly what he is.
But I
but
think. Go
I
ahead.
think that, well, I was gonna say that like I live in Miami, which is considered like traditionally like a really dangerous kind of, you know, and yet also very exciting and wonderful place at the same time. So and I have family in Toronto, and I have friends in Montreal, and I really like Canada and stuff like that. And I've traveled extensively throughout the United States. I've been in New York, I've been to the West Coast, and I lived in Seattle, and and I've even been to Chicago, so like the Midwest, and I've been to Texas, which is pretty
Yeah.
awesome.
What part?
Dallas and Houston.
Okay.
And
You
I'm
should
dying
come
to
to
go.
Austin.
I
Austin's
know, I'm dying to go to Austin. Austin's supposed to be like the jewel of Texas, kind of. So, and
yeah, you'd
Austin
like
City
it.
Limits. I want to go to Austin City Limits. I used to watch it as a kid, so it's pretty exciting. But other than that, but going into that, like I think that there is definitely dangerous things happening. But I always kind of try to look back at something interesting that I thought happen in my real life, and that like how the media kind of, and whether whatever side of the media you're on, it doesn't matter. There's just hyperbole in the media. It's that there was like a very small, you know, hate rally happening in Seattle, and I happened to live like and could see the rally happening, and yeah, like there was enough people to fill like a whole like street block, like a block of the street. But like when I saw that later on TV, and like my mom even called me, and she was like, "Are you safe? Is the city like under siege?" Like, you know, like the way that it was presented here in Florida, like when they finally got wind of this on the news, they thought like Seattle was overrun by like, you know, like this hate group, and like that like, you know, all this was happening when it was just really a really tiny amount of people. And I'm not saying that like small groups can't do awful things. I just think that like what you're seeing in Canada might be a little more than, it's not happening day to day. It definitely is, like there are definitely bad things out there that are happening that need to be dealt with. But I think for the most part, we're hoping in 2 more years things will change. And if we have to deal with it for another 6 years, Americans will get through it, and we'll elect someone. The counter wave will be way bigger, is all I can say.
Well, that's the thing. We only get the bad news. Like
Yeah.
if it bleeds,
Yeah,
it leads, basically.
right.
Yeah,
So
whenever I
yeah.
talk to like someone in another country, they're always like, so there's just people like shooting each other in America all the time. But it's not quite that bad, but
Well, I mean, you would think so, because and this is a true statement, like it's not untrue. You know, there's been like a shooting occurring somewhere in the United States every day. But if you think about our population and
yeah.
how many people there are, like yes, of course there is a shooting going on every day in America. It's just, you know, I do wish that gun control, like the story that kind of stuck out to me in the most recent times, uh you know, and I hate any kind of story of unnecessary violence or death, but like the one that stood out to me is like there's a young man who survived the Las Vegas shooting, only to be killed in the bar shooting in California.
No,
And
isn't that the guy who survived 2 shootings?
yeah, and then he died.
Yeah.
Like, so to me,
Oh,
that's
wow.
unimaginably
Oh,
awful. And
that's
like,
terrible.
yeah, it's like, but now it does tell you that like, you know, the problem's been something that I think Americans are trying to deal with, and hopefully it'll come to a head soon, but not a violent head. Hopefully it'll come to like a peaceful resolution where like, gun enthusiasts like can concede to certain things and move on.
Yeah,
Wow.
like it's you.
But we've gone way off topic.
I know, yeah.
It all goes back to the fear-based society. Like when you're
Yeah,
living in a society of violence and constant threat. And I know, like as Americans, like you're not necessarily going out your door and fucking dealing with this shit every day. Statistically, you're not gonna be involved in something like that. But the frequency of it and the fear climate, and everybody talks about this like
There's
fear.
definitely more anxieties now than
Yeah, like so that's
in
why
recent
that going
history.
back to Saru, that's kind of like why he's really relatable because we live in a society now. I'm not talking about Americans, like worldwide. Like we're just headed toward an age where like we don't know what the fuck is going to happen. Like the Earth is changing, and we're not doing enough to solve that. Uh, there's political divide. We have world leaders who are pieces of shit, and then some who are great. And then you have the American
Economic
president.
disparity, people are having a hard time getting out of debt or like just basic earning a living wage. So that brings on a lot of stress, a lot of fears, a lot of anxiety.
Yeah, and like overcoming that kind of thing and being brave and trudging forward and all this is what Saru, the character, going back to the whole thing, is what he's all about. And that's why I personally he's my favorite character.
Yeah, you can only be brave when you're scared.
Hmm. Doctor Who?
I think it's from Game of Thrones actually. I think like Ned
Oh,
Stark
maybe
says
that's
that in the
true.
first
I think
book.
there's something similar, a similar kind of
Daenerys eats a heart in that, doesn't she?
point in Doctor Who.
Yeah, Daenerys eats a heart. She eats a horse heart. So yeah, we have a heart. It all comes full circle. We went back to Blood Oath with the Klingons.
I like. Do you guys like Dune?
Yeah,
No,
I love Dune.
I think
no,
sometimes,
no.
I like definitely as a human being, as a human being, like fear is something that
Fear is
comes
the
into
vine
play.
killer.
Yeah, and so that's what
Mm.
I always go to is the litany against fear. If you read the whole thing, it's actually quite beautiful. And it kind of, I don't know, there's different things that like I think can have the same effect on different people, but for me that in particular like helps me to calm down a little bit. And when you realize kind of like, hey, like yeah, fear could be a good thing if you know how to keep it at bay, and like it might actually help you survive a situation should it come upon you.
Yeah. So I think the conclusion we can walk away from this with is that Saru should either A, read Dune, or B, move to Canada where weed is legal, and that'll take care of his
I
anxieties.
I think the U.S. will be in 5 years. We'll have legal weed in too many states, and it'll just be a snowball effect. But I do. If I didn't have so many things keeping me here in America, family and friends and godsons and nieces and nephews and all kinds of things like that, I totally moved to Canada. I've always loved your country there, PJ.
We are so spoiled.
Yes, you. God damn you.
The
Yeah.
only trade-off is that you're like cold all the time.
No, go to the West Coast, go to Vancouver. I wanted to move there, but it was a pain in the ass to move to your country. But then I'd have to rename Tex-Trek. It would have to be like British Columbia Trek, and that sounds weird.
BC track. Oh my
BC
god.
Trek, yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Maybe someday.
Park that name for the eventuality
Yeah, I
one
need to
day.
get on that domain name. But I think that's all I got. Unless there's anyone in the chat wants to ask us anything, or if the two of you have anything else you want to get off your chest before we sign off.
I just want to say thank you again. I really got excited. I'm sorry I came like I almost forgot about this episode of Treks. By the way, I've been pretty immersed in work, and there's been a couple of things like I got a concussion, and like all these things have been happening. So
Oh wow.
totally, yeah. Well, yeah. Just don't worry. You can listen to Rogue Drunk Space Nine when it airs, and you'll hear the whole story
I'll have
there.
to check that out then. Is it a drunk
anyways,
story?
So there's a show I do called Drunk Space Nine, and it ended sort of. I don't know, it's kind of in a hiatus or it's like unknown, but I started a Rogue Drunk Space Nine with someone totally different that now continues where Drunk Space Nine left off. So I just promoted that. So go listen to that if you want to know about my concussion once it airs. It hasn't aired yet.
I'll be on the lookout for that.
Sweet. But what I was going to say is that when I saw your message, I got so excited. I was like, holy crap, there's a short Treks. That's right. But then I was like, oh, holy crap, we're going to talk about it afterwards. And that's what got me like even more excited. So it's pretty nice to see you guys. And I appreciate you having me on. And I just want to say how cool this was. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for joining. It's always a lot of fun.
Yeah, this was great. Thanks.
Okay, well, if that's all we got, then this will be it for tonight, but we will be back on January 3rd to discuss the Short Treks finale, The Escape Artist, written by Rick and Morty writer Michael McMahon, who is the Star Trek Lower Decks showrunner, and directed by Rainn Wilson himself. So that'll be in 2019. Cool. Yeah, it did look cool. There looks like there are some Klingons and a Tellarite and some Orions. So
I didn't see that.
Yeah, you gotta wait till it's after the credits, maybe, or something.
Yeah, well, he's watching it on Space Channel.
Oh,
they might not show it.
Canada's not so cool anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, if the trailer's online, it's probably region blocked, so you can't watch it on YouTube either.
Oh no. Just kidding.
But his healthcare is covered by the government, so
I know. Okay, Canada's
isn't that awesome?
Yes, it is awesome.
I don't have to pay anything. All I have to do is wait 48 hours to get any kind of doctor to look at me. I have to sit in a waiting room for days upon end because there's like 1 million people in the fucking hospital every goddamn day. If you go to the doctor, there's 1 million people in there. You're waiting 4 or 5 hours at least. So there's a trade-off. It's free, but you got to wait just a little bit longer. You could be dead by the time you get treated, but but it's free.
Well, I guess you get what you pay for, but yeah, it definitely sounds like it has its advantages.
We should just get together and talk about our countries. I think
we need like a whole other YouTube channel for that.
YouTube channel just for that. I think it's really fun.
But if you want to let us know where we can find any of your content, gentlemen.
Well, you can find me on Twitter at PJ's Channel 1, or on Twitter. On fucking YouTube. I have like the giggles now. Shit. Bo Trek or PJ's Channel. That's it.
Yeah, everyone in Canada seems to have the giggles now, but
that's because we're always fucking high on weed, man.
Starfleet boy, what about yourself?
You can find me, of course, on Twitter at Starfleet Boy, YouTube at Starfleet Boy, all the things at Starfleet Boy, and that means like Instagram and Facebook and all the things. So Starfleet Boy is me, and then Drunk Space Nine, which is a fun show where I drink heavily and talk about Star Trek Deep Space Nine. So check that out, and then Rogue Drunk Space Nine coming soon.
All right, a little tease there. As always, everyone can follow me on Twitter at TXTrek, and check out the Tex-Trek Facebook page. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel so you don't miss any of our podcast episodes we're doing on the first and third Sunday of every month. And then we'll be doing weekly Star Trek Discovery episodes on Sundays starting in January. And we'll be back, like I said, to talk about the next short trek on January 3rd. Until next time, live long and prosper, y'all.
Peace.